For Off the Block, I'm Vinny Lopes, and we are now joined by the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee Chairman Ron Shayka, just days before Selection Sunday. And Ron, it was a nutty night last night in the NCAA Tournament, but I want to ask you, what is this time of the year like for you guys as you prepare to get that NCAA Tournament field set?
Well, Vinny, I think what happens is there are a lot of phone calls and texts being shared and going back and forth, and it really happens by the hour, I think. The committee keeps an eye on all of the tournament games that are going on across the country, and we keep playing what-if scenarios as matches go and results come in, and we try to figure out what the possible matchups are and what the implications are depending on who wins each of those matches coming up.
Right. Well, and I do want to ask you about that. I don't know how much you can get into it because I know you can't talk too much about it until the field is announced, but how much, just kind of in broad senses, how much did Penn State losing change the dynamics of the NCAA tournament field, potentially?
I think the biggest thing is that you have two teams in the EIVA championship match that neither of the schools have been in that position in a long time, and so one of those two teams are going to be the AQ, and that means that you start looking at what those two schools have done over the year and what possible matchups might be with either one advancing. So, a lot of times Penn State was penciled in, at least in a lot of the thinking from the EIVA as far as projecting a tournament field. This time you've got two new schools, and that's going to make some changes.
Right. And, looking at the at-large bid race right now, I know there's still a lot of what-ifs, but there's a potential that this could be really close. Can you recall a time when it's been, this close, maybe debating between a couple schools?
Yeah, we've had a couple of those scenarios over the past couple of years where when you start crunching numbers, things come down very close, and one school has an advantage in one category, and that other school beats them out in another place, and so you keep weighing one against the other, and I think that when schools are so close, particularly in the RPI, which is meant to help things, it does help to keep at least some parameters there, but when they're so close, then you start looking at individual issues like head-to-head and strength of schedule, things like that, then those things start taking a little bit more importance.
Yeah, well, and with that being said, I know that you mentioned a few of the criteria categories, but is there any criteria, one in particular, that the committee is wanting to place additional weight on this season?
No, I don't think it's this season. I think we've been fairly consistent over the last few years, looking at certainly head-to-head competition. The RPI overall is a big one. Strength of schedule is a big one. And the other thing that schools have done a nice job is more cross-conference play. And that's been an emphasis on the committee or from the committee over the last few years, and schools have responded. And those additional cross-conference matches actually help down the stretch in evaluating how teams match up against each other.
Right. Well, and I do want to ask you about that because, as you mentioned, you had a lot of cross-conference play. But is the committee more inclined to reward a team that had more non-conference matches than another team, or is it kind of you play 5 compared to 4? That's pretty good, and that's considered kind of an even draw.
Well, again, I think the number of cross-conference matches is a good piece of criteria, but also the quality of those cross-conference matches as well. When you put it on the scale, you might weigh out fewer cross-conference matches against stronger opponents than maybe a few extra matches against maybe weaker opponents. So all of that comes into play. It's not an exact science for sure, but we've been very pleased with the school's response to that, and we try to look at those matches in totality and make the best decision from there.
For me personally, one of the things that's always amazed me about this committee is just the high amount of ethics that you guys have in really working to create the right field. And one of the interesting things this year, the possibilities of the dynamics is you're on the committee. You're also an associate AD at George Mason. There's an associate Ohio State AD on the committee as well. And can you just inform people kind of how that process works when you're discussing the field and your team comes up, or a team that you're affiliated comes up with in the discussion?
Well, what happens is that we get input from all the committee members, certainly starting with their representation of their region. So they give us, everybody weighs in as to how they feel maybe their particular team stacks up within their region, and we can weight that accordingly. What happens, though, is when a decision comes down to an actual vote as to where a team should be seated or whether or not a team should get into the field, if that's your school, then you're not voting, and the other members have to pick up the slack from there.
Right. And I do want to ask, we've discussed the NCAA tournament field coming out on Sunday, but the other intriguing bit of news is going to be where the playing matches are going to be played, whether they're going to be played on campus sites next Saturday or played at Penn State that Tuesday. And for you as a committee, is it primarily a financial issue in determining where those matches will be played?
Well, I think, Vinny, it's important to realize that particular decision isn't a committee decision.
Oh, okay.
The committee is tasked to select the field and seed the field.
Okay.
Then the NCAA basically takes a look at the logistics and puts it under the umbrella of NCAA play-ins, not volleyball, not soccer, whatever. It's just the play-ins, and there are some general assumptions made about all NCAA play-in games with the sports that utilize that are used to try to be consistent in running the tournament.
Okay, so this isn't a situation where you're on Expedia looking at plane prices and trying to crunch the numbers.
They don't pay us enough for that. Well, I guess they don't pay us at all.
Yes.
That's beside the point.
Yes. All right. Well, I know I've hit you with a lot of questions here, but I do want to ask you, you are the associate AD at George Mason. Exciting time in the EIVA. You guys are playing for the right to make your first NCAA tournament since, I believe, 1988. Just for you as an AD, how excited are you to see the potential of George Mason making it back to the NCAA tournament field?
Well, it's fantastic to see Jay Hossack and our team doing as well as they've done to this point. As an AD and being associated with the program, formerly as the coach there and now as an athletic director, I have a lot of pride in the tradition, and there's nothing that made me happier than to see the reaction of our alumni last weekend when we were able to knock off St. Francis and Penn State in one weekend, and certainly yesterday to advance to the championship. So I couldn't be happier for those guys that have played under the program and continue to support us, and so I'm happy for them.